In this presentation, we're going to focus on the Gulf issue of oil spills. So we're going to start with the BP deepwater oil spill of 2010. At this time, over 130 million gallons of crude oil was dumped into the Gulf of Mexico. It was the biggest oil spill ever in the United States waters and remains one of the worst environmental disasters in world history. 11 rig workers lost their lives in addition to untold millions of marine mammals, sea turtles, birds, and fish. While the world watched helplessly, oil gushed into one of the planet's most biodiverse marine habitats for 87 long days. A decade later, many species such as deep-sea coral, common loons, and spotted sea trout are still struggling. By contrast, there are a few Gulf inhabitants that have shown a robust recovery, among them Manhattan fish and the brown pelican, which happens to be Louisiana's state bird. So now we're going to break down and look at a few key species and animal groups that have been impacted. So starting with the bottlenose dolphin. Recent research, not yet published in a peer-reviewed journal, has shown that only about 20% of pregnancies among the dolphins in Louisiana's heavily oiled Barataria Bay are successful, compared with 83% in unoiled regions. This number remains unchanged from 2015 findings. The Gulf of Mexico is home to 5 species of sea turtle, all of which are protected under the Endangered Species Act. Leatherbacks and Atlantic hawkbills roam offshore waters, while loggerhead, green, and Kemp's Ridley sea turtles frequent nearshore habitats. A 2017 study estimated that of at least 402,000 sea turtles exposed to oil during the spill, 51% were Kemp's Ridleys, the smallest and most critically endangered species. And you can see this arrow is pointing to the Kemp's Ridley sea turtle. Before the spill, the Kemp's Ridley population had been projected to grow at a rate of 19% per year. Instead, the number of nests on Gulf beaches, which is the species' main nesting location, dropped 35% between 2009 and 2010 and plummeted again in 2013. That research also suggested that Kemp's Ridley females have struggled to maintain the weight and health necessary to reproduce. Birds were among the hardest hit animals immediately after the spill. We know the number of birds affected was somewhere between 100,000 and 1 million. Unfortunately, we'll never know the true number. And this statistic includes common loons, northern gannets, double-crested cormorants, royal terns, Wilson's plovers, black skimmers, and seaside sparrows, just to name a few. Also affected were up to 32% of laughing gulls and up to a quarter of all brown pelicans. Many birds that weren't killed outright by the oil coating their feathers have since shown higher rates of oil-related cancers, reproductive issues, and a reduced ability to regulate their body temperatures due to feather damage. But just as birds overall were most devastated, in some cases, they seem to be showing some of the strongest recovery. So settlement money was put to use restoring Louisiana's Queen Bess Island as a bird habitat. So this project was completed this past February and is being hailed as a success for brown pelicans, with up to 20% of the state's population already nesting there, along with gray egrets, roseate spoonbills, royal terns, and tricolored herons. What was a bust for birds turned into a temporary boon for some fish. Scientists think that the lack of birds in the skies over the Gulf of Mexico is one reason some populations of fish exploded after the spill. There were twice as many Gulf menhaden, for example, in the years following the spill as in 4 decades before, likely because so many fish-eating birds were absent. Other fish species have shown evidence of having been harmed by oil, including nearly 2/3 of all Gulf sturgeon, which is a threatened species. And you can see the Gulf sturgeon in this image above. Studies of the economically valuable spotted sea trout and red drum found that fish in oiled areas showed reduced reproduction, and that even years after the spill, oil remaining in the environment is still toxic to fish larvae. Recent research that tested 2,500 different fish across the Gulf found evidence of oil exposure in all 91 species sampled, suggesting that the impacts of the spill are widespread and ongoing. Moving into how to mitigate the effects of an oil spill, this is a difficult task. So those that are involved in the oil spill cleanup industry will admit that no two oil spills are alike. Variables such as type of oil, location of the spill, amount of oil spilled, weather conditions, and proximity to delicate areas are always different. Thus, cleanup professionals must be prepared to face a variety of problems, both known and unknown. The volume of the spill can be estimated by observing the thickness of the coast of oil and its appearance and color on the surface of the water. Estimating the volume of a spill is important when deciding which strategies to use for cleanup. So determining the volume of a spill is only the beginning of trying to clean it up. If a cleanup crew can reach the site of the spill, contaminant and skimming technologies can efficiently begin the process. Large sponges, which are called sorbents, can also be used to absorb much of the oil. However, if time, wind, and tides are working against the crew, the task becomes a lot more formidable as the oil spreads. Eventually, the natural elements through time will break down the oil through such processes as evaporation, so some are left alone. But if not, sometimes there's controlled burning, which is used under the right conditions, or in some regions, dispersants are employed to speed up the natural process of the breakdown of oil. Unfortunately, though, many dispersants are dangerous to wildlife. Frequently, fertilizers that are rich in phosphates and nitrates are spread over an oil slick in hope that these chemicals will cause microorganisms such as dinoflagellates to bloom and eat up the oil. Recently, it's really cool, some researchers have genetically engineered bacteria to break down oil. So no matter what method is employed, the process of cleanup and remediation is guaranteed to be costly. So here's a diagram that shows some of the different methods of cleanup. You can see letting the spill break down by natural means, using booms to channel and collect the oil, using dispersants to break up the oil, using biological agents to degrade the oil, burning off the oil, and recently using a bell to collect the oil. So as a result of the deep water horizon, a lot of new ways of containing and stopping oil were attempted. So one method involved placing a large 4-story containment box over the point of a leak in hopes that it would channel the oil to be collected. The box was successful in shallower water, but as the box was lowered deeper and deeper, cold water actually filled the box with ice crystals, and so the attempt failed. All right, the next attempt involved threading a pipe into part of the broken pipes still connected to the blowout preventer. So the smaller pipe was successfully threaded into the larger pipe, but only a small portion of the oil could be siphoned to the surface where a tanker captured it. Another method relied on shooting mud golf balls and pieces of tire into the blowout preventer, hoping to fill the holes. However, the force of the oil and natural gas spewing from the well was too strong, and this junk shot was then abandoned. Okay, then several weeks later, engineers used robots to cut off part of the broken blowout preventer and then affixed a second blowout preventer as a cap. And over several days, they began closing vents on the second blowout preventer, monitoring the pressure all the while to ensure the well's integrity. This temporary cap sealed off the oil until crews could finish drilling the relief well, which then was the permanent way to seal off the spewing well. Even after permanently sealing this well, though, cleanup had to continue for many months. So that was a lot of words. So to look at this information in a different way, let's watch this video from NOAA.
The Deepwater Horizon oil spill began in April 2010 and continued for 87 days. By the time it was finally contained, 134 million gallons of oil had been released into the Gulf of Mexico, making it the largest marine oil spill in U.S. history.
The Gulf of Mexico is pretty much everything to myself and family. I was fishing at the time when the rig blew, and the next day we were sitting and I saw the oil on the surface, and so we just cut the trip and came on in.
The oil spread throughout the Gulf. It sank down to the ocean floor, mixed into the water column, seeped into marshes and soiled beaches. Animals swam through it, inhaled it, and even ingested the oil. The impacts from the spill affected the entire Gulf ecosystem.
The Deepwater Horizon oil spill also impacted our Gulf communities, which are so closely tied and linked to the natural resources of the Gulf, from folks that earn their living through fishing, recreation, to tourism and beachgoers. All were impacted by the spill.
NOAA led the effort to determine the total harm from the spill, along with other federal agencies in the Gulf states. In 2016, a settlement was reached with BP, and we are now using billions of dollars from that settlement and other penalties to restore the Gulf.
The Deepwater Horizon restoration effort is the largest restoration effort in history. NOAA has taken the lead in restoration projects for a variety of habitats, including restoring marshes along the coastline and restoring corals. This also includes projects to restore sea turtles and marine mammals and to restore our fisheries.
Because of the spill, many adult fish, including bluefin tuna and swordfish, were harmed. The oil also killed trillions of fish larvae. This meant that a few years later, some populations would be much smaller.
Fishing was good, but after 2 years, it started dropping off more, and it got extremely bad.
Now, last year was probably the worst year we've seen in quite a while.
Today, we are working with Gulf fishermen to help fish populations rebound. They volunteer to refrain from fishing during certain times of year or switch to alternative gear types. The gear helps fishermen continue fishing for yellowfin tuna and swordfish while reducing the amount of other fish caught accidentally, like bluefin tuna.
The bycatch, the bycatch is extremely low. The bonus part is every time there's a bycatch, it's released alive. That's a bonus for it.
This project is inspiring a new generation of fishermen, and this younger generation is also energized on the coast. Members of the Gulf Corps program gain skills and experience in conservation while helping to restore Gulf habitats. These jobs also help boost the local economy.
These projects are beneficial that they're helping us with, tackling erosion, recreating habitat, and then also monitoring these projects to see if they were successful.
We have totally transformed this beach. We were building an artificial reef and planting spartina marsh grass, and we have turned it into something that's going to last for a lifetime.
And that's what makes me so excited to be a part of it, is because this area has been hit hard, and this program is really providing youth an opportunity to recover and rebuild and help be a part of restoring that community.
I feel like I'm making an impact in the community that I love, and the skills that I've been able to build upon here could really build a sustainable future for myself and my family.
Restoring the Gulf of Mexico will be a long process. It will take decades to get the habitat, fisheries, and wildlife back to where they were before the spill. NOAA's strong collaboration with Gulf communities and partners like fishermen and Conservation Corps members is key to building a resilient and healthy Gulf and making restoration a reality.
To be able to help restore what was damaged, it makes me feel so great to know that I was involved and that I can be proud of what we've done. And
it gives you a purpose. It has you leaving every day feeling fulfilled and feeling happy.
I fell in love with this line of work, not for me or for my father's generation, but for my son's generation. In order for us to restore the Gulf, everybody has to put a hand in. Make the Gulf as if it's your own home. Take care of it.
So in the video we just watched, they mentioned a settlement from BP to help clean up the cost of the spill. It was the largest environmental damage settlement in United States history, $20.8 billion. The settlement ended all civil and criminal penalty claims against the owners and operators of the rig, so BP, Anadarko, Transocean, and Halliburton. And this was under the Clean Water Act and the Oil Pollution Act. It also included economic damage claims submitted by the 5 Gulf states and their local governments. In May 2019, the U.S. Department of the Interior rolled back safety regulations to offshore drilling that were put in place to prevent a repeat of the Deepwater Horizon spill. At the same time, there have been proposed expansions of the Gulf protected areas like the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary. So let's watch Sir Patrick Pictures explain this proposal further.
Hello, my name is G.P. Schmall. I'm with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, and I'm the superintendent of the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary. The Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary is a marine protected area, something very similar to a national park, except out in the water. Most people aren't aware that a lot of these areas even exist, but the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary protects an incredibly healthy and incredibly important coral reef ecosystem located about 100 miles offshore of the coast of Texas and Louisiana. It's about 56 square miles in size, and it protects 3 individual bank features: the East Flower Garden Bank, West Flower Garden Bank, and another feature called Stetson Bank. All of these areas were recognized early on as being very important, as being very providing critical habitat for a variety of communities, biological communities, and fish species.
So now let's look at Restoration Tracker. This is a tool made by the Gulf of Mexico Alliance to track restoration, research, and recovery projects that result from the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill. So if you watch as I click, you can interact with the map to see all of the projects that have happened. So I'm going to zoom into the Gulf of Mexico. And all right, so once you get down to your particular region, each dot represents a project. So this one, the implementing organization was Ducks Unlimited, and it says the year it was funded, 2016, and the state. So you can use this research to zoom in on Houston or any other area in Texas to see how many projects have resulted to restore the Gulf. Now let's look at some art inspiration surrounding oil spills. So starting off, this piece depicts pelicans struggling to take flight due to an oil spill. And this is by artist Caitlin Shen. In this next piece, Sherry Shen paints oil inside the ocean, grabbing the sea creatures as they're trying to escape. To see more student pieces like both of these, visit bosea.org. And lastly, we have an installation piece at Gray Art Gallery. So when visitors come in, they encounter what looks like these giant puddles of crude oil pooling on the wooden floor. And occasionally they're stepped on by visitors who neglect to look down. But this shiny black oil is actually a porcelain installation.